Quiet and unassuming, Carlo Gambino was a force to be reckoned with. He was the active head of the brigada named after him for almost 20 years. He had been the underboss for years before that and a top capo even earlier, and he was arguably one of the most powerful mafioso to ever operate in this country. This is his story. Carlo Gambino was born in 1902 in Palermo, Sicily, and immigrated illegally to this country in 1921. He resided in Brooklyn for years, and by the late 1950s, he built an oceanfront home in Massapequa, Long Island. His next-door neighbor was his close friend and top capo, Ettore Terry Zappi. Carlo had several brothers who would join him in the life. He also had 3 sons and many cousins on both sides of the Atlantic who were active mafiosi. The closest of these would always be his brother Paolo, or Paul in English, a capo and his closest advisor and partner. Carlo Gambino had an unassuming presence, a quiet and very reserved demeanor typical of the old-style mafioso of Sicily who he emulated. Many mistook his appearance and sealed lips as a sign of fear and weakness. They would be among those who would succumb to his sharp wit and mind over his career. A master at deception and Machiavellian intrigue, Carlo would eventually eclipse all he came in contact with as he rose to become the most powerful mafioso of his time. At the height of his power, he was considered the capo di tutti capi, or boss of all bosses, of Cosa Nostra in America. Carlo was a key attendee at the infamous Apalachian meeting in 1957. It was said that his position as family boss was ratified at this meeting. Known as the Fox, Carlo often made the analogy of the lion and the fox, explaining that to be both was optimal in this life, but that the fox was the most important so as to see the traps and pitfalls in order to avoid them. He was indeed a fox in his machinations and the key maneuvers he made throughout his lifetime. Carlo Gambino's personal rackets over the years included bootlegging, ration stamp thefts and counterfeiting, gambling, shylocking, currency counterfeiting, extortions, and international heroin smuggling. But as leader of the family, he had his hands in virtually every racket run by the varied members of his brigada. He held partnership in the Carroll Paper Products Company of Brooklyn. He also was a partner in SGS Associates of Manhattan, a labor consulting firm that he utilized in his labor union racketeering schemes for decades. Working quietly with his brother Paul, Carlo was said to have become a millionaire early on, by the end of the 1920s, through major alcohol bootlegging rings he headed. His minions ran alcohol stills throughout the tri-state area, producing millions of gallons of illicit liquor that made him and his brother a fortune. He made his second fortune shortly thereafter with the advent of World War II. He astutely became the largest supplier of stolen gas ration stamps in New York City. Through burglaries of government OPA offices and the later fencing of stamps from other thieves, he cornered the market. He also later operated an intricate stamp counterfeiting ring, thereby supplying most of the other mobs in the city with the coveted ration stamps in one form or another. Besides gas stamps, he also supplied other ration stamps for foods, nylons, tires, and other hard-to-get items because of the ongoing war in Europe. It is not an overstatement to say that these two rackets, in which he either dominated or was a major player, made him untold millions. But it's what he did with those millions in the future that set him apart from many of his more street-oriented and crude brethren. He would step back even further into the shadows and allow his rank and file to expand and solidify the brigada, a move that served them all well for years to come. His brother Paul was said to have overseen a major alien smuggling ring that the Gambino brothers later orchestrated. The Sicily to North American pipeline was said to have ferried thousands of illegal Sicilian and Italian immigrants into the New York area over several decades of operation. Many of these Sicilians were either already mafiosi back in Sicily or became affiliated with the Gambino family after being brought to America. This would become his third fortune made and the rackets they would run for the longest time. It ran for decades. Although they may have smuggled in illegals earlier in their careers, it was right after World War II that the Gambino brothers would start in earnest. Starting in the early 1950s, they would form a network from Sicily into America through Canada, the ports of New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, among other routes developed. A dual purpose was the smuggling of packets of heroin which these illegals were obligated to carry on their person or in their luggage as payment for their being ferried to the United States. This became his fourth fortune. It was also during this time that many of his Gambino cousins from Palermo, Sicily came to America. Carlo was their sponsor and eased their way into the country, setting them up and helping them to get started, first settling in Brooklyn and in later years most relocating to South New Jersey, where they became known as the Cherry Hill Gambinos. Well known today, John Gambino and his brothers Rosario and Joe and many other cousins and their amici were the core mafiosi Carlo utilized for his heroin smuggling operations. Some of these amici also brought over millions in top-quality counterfeit notes in $10, $20, $50, and $100 denominations that Sicilian master artists designed for the wholesale distribution in North America and Canada. Gambino was a staunch supporter of the Palermo faction of the family, and they in turn looked to him as one of their top faction leaders. Carlo was never known for having been a tough and violent mafioso. In fact, his strength was actually the opposite. Considered very astute to underworld politics and a tactician, over the decades Gambino would rise from a soldier to capo status to serve as underboss until he pulled a coup in concert with his mentor Vito Genovese and several other top mafiosi to overthrow the violent reign of the Calabrian Albert Anastasia, who Carlo and other family powers felt didn't deserve to lead. Having always been a Palermo-based organization, they collectively wanted a Palermitano to head the Brigata. After taking power in 1957, Carlo Gambino would run the family better than it had ever been overseen before. He expanded their influence and control over labor unions, international alien and narcotics smuggling activity from Sicily, and their move into legitimate business. He did the latter by moving like-minded men into positions of power within the structure. Business-oriented mafiosi like Ettore Zappi and Pasquale Conti, who although operating key street rackets were also business-savvy, thereby leading the overall family into key industries that strengthened the membership for the future. Examples included Zappi infiltrating and ultimately taking over ownership of the famed Castro Convertible Company, the mattress couch manufacturer out in New Hyde Park on Long Island, and Conti, who after inheriting a string of meat markets in Brooklyn and Queens from his mafioso father, expanded them into the Conti supermarket chain, a huge conglomerate of full-service food stores sprinkled throughout the city of New York. Other excellent moves Carlo Gambino made was his expansion into the garment district, where over several decades he would become the largest trucker of garments among many mobbed-up trucking firms, a multi-million-dollar enterprise later gifted to his sons Tommy and Joseph. And his guiding hand over the development and expansion by his brother Paul, cousins Paul Castellano, Peter Castellana, and several nephews, into the wholesale meat industry through Pride Meats and Western Beef, among many more operations operating under different corporate names. Or the Blue Star Markets, a chain of retail butcher meat stores popular within the 5 boroughs. And let's not forget Furrow Foods Incorporated, one of the dominant wholesale pizzeria supply distribution firms run by his relatives Frank Gambino and Frank Farrow, the son and son-in-law of his brother Paul. These are but a few examples of the business acumen of Carlo Gambino. Carlo Gambino complained of a bad heart for decades. He used this claim as a successful defense against testifying in court and in various criminal cases the government tried bringing against him over the years. The FBI always thought it a ruse, but in fact, he did have a weak heart, and in 1976, he finally succumbed to it. He was 74 years old. Carlo Gambino left a legacy second to none in the underworld. Today, blood relatives of his still operate within the Brigata he built, and his name lives on in infamy through this family that is named after him to this very day, some 44 years after his death. And that's the end of our short story on Carlo Gambino. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to visit thenewyorkmafia.com to read more about Carlo Gambino and the Gambino family. Thank you for watching. Until next time.